There aren't that many mangaka who can claim to have created multiple hit series, but even among those, there's still a clear winner, being Hiro Mashima, the creator of Fairy Tail, Rave Master, and Eden Zero, with all three of those being incredibly successful. Yet, at the same time, he gets bombarded with hate due to his use of the power of friendship tropes, the lack of consequences in his series, and seemingly most egregious of all, the recycling of his character designs and storylines. However, what if I told you that this idea of reusing things is actually a genius design choice which authors have been using for centuries, going all the way back to 16th century Italian theater? And that's what we're going to be talking about today, how the techniques and practices of the Commedia Dell'Arte are used by Fairy Tail and Eden Zero to make them some of the most popular manga of all time. Now, despite all the complaints that it receives, and despite all of its many flaws, Fairy Tail is unquestionably one of the most beloved series of all time. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find just about anyone who hasn't heard of this series. I don't know if it's the same for all of you, but as I was getting into anime, Fairy Tail always kind of felt like the little brother of the big three, right? You had One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach, and then their mom, Shonen Jump, was telling them that they had to bring Fairy Tail with them when they went out to play. And there's a lot of reasons for that feeling of connection between these series. Each of them makes use of very powerful elements in similar ways, but the most iconic thing that they share is that these stories are fun adventures about finding family, and that they can balance that fun aspect with incredibly powerful moments that can break or warm your heart. To be able to do that, though, it is incredibly important for the characters to be people that the audience can genuinely connect with. One Piece does this through its soul-crushing backstories. Naruto did it through a cast that expanded as the protagonist finds a place that he belongs in the world, and Bleach achieved this by giving us characters with the ambition to move mountains to be there for their friends. However, Fairy Tail is a little bit different. Its characters win you over simply by being fun. They are just likable and exciting people who, despite their differences, love and welcome each other. And with that as the mentality at the core of the series, they welcome you into their guild too. Even when characters like Loxus slip up and lose their way, admittedly in a pretty violent and drastic way, the entire guild is ready to welcome them back with open arms, because it is a whole community built around love and mutual respect. They aren't just a guild, they are a family. And that really is Fairy Tail's greatest strength. But this is also the element that non-Fairy Tail fans have the biggest problems with. And that's because it blooms into three very distinct issues. Firstly, this strong tie between the characters is often demonstrated as the power of friendship, which swells up at the end of each conflict and almost always takes shape in Natsu receiving a last-minute power-up that allows him to defeat his enemy. Second, with each character being someone that we love so dearly, Mashima became completely adverse to letting anyone die for any reason. Because of that, even my own favorite moment in the series, Ultir's sacrifice, ends up leaving a sour taste behind because she just shows up 10 minutes later anyways, after supposedly having given up her life to save her new friends. And finally, this sense of family really shines through in filler episodes. These give you a peek behind the curtain and allow you to see the guild in a more interpersonal light, but there are also moments that are extremely silly and appear way too often in the series, which can make even the most serious character feel like they're a clown sometimes. But on the other hand, when we move to Eden Zero, Mashima's next story, we can see a lot of improvement on how this idea is presented. Mashima makes characters who are just as lovable, but adds consequences which makes them feel more tangible and real. But at the same time, you just have to look at Elsie or Justice to see that not much thought or effort was put into making their designs. Which is kind of weird, right? And it begs the question, if characters are so important to his series, and if Mashima is such a talented writer, why does every major flaw within his stories stem from his characters? And why wouldn't more care be put into them if they are what make his series so endearing? Well, the answer to that question reaches all the way back to the Commedia Dell'Arte. This was a popular form of Italian theater between the 16th and 18th century, and intentionally or not, Fairy Tail and Eden Zero share a lot with it. At its most basic, the Commedia Dell'Arte is essentially improv theater meant to be as approachable as possible. It is the meeting place of literary societies and street performers, where both nobility and commoners could be welcomed as viewers who would find value and representation from what they saw on stage. Essentially, no matter who you were, you would be able to find something that you could enjoy. But how do you make a stage show where anyone could instantly recognize the plot, the characters, and the themes in the 1500s? It's not like you'd be able to look things up on the internet to stay up to date, right? Well, you do it with stock characters. This performance is famous for making use of stock characters with distinct costumes, masks, and personalities that could be used in any given performance. For example, if you see someone wearing a mask, a patched jacket, and holding a wooden spatula, a literal slapstick, then you'd obviously be like, yo, that's my boy Arlecchino, this simple-minded young servant known for comedic relief. I love that guy. Or maybe you see a striped suit and a feathered cap on the stage, so you know Il Capitano was just about to boast about his great war exploits, right before Brighella played another classic prank on them. You know how Brighella loves her pranks. It was honestly almost like the costume version of typecasting. Just like Helena Bonham Carter is always going to be vaguely spooky, Michael Cera is always going to be awkward, Jason Statham is going to be an action man, and Ken Jeong is always going to be an over-the-top comedic relief character. Just by seeing certain actors on screen today, we can have a general idea of what's happening in the movie, even if we don't have any other context, right? Like, we might not have the full story, but just by seeing certain actors, you can sit down, pick up the movie, and have an idea of what's happening within a few seconds. Well, it was the exact same for the Commedia dell'arte. Simply by using consistent costume designs, these shows could allow any audience to instantly recognize what the narrative was and jump into the performance. And that sense of understanding created an intrinsic bond between the audience and the show that made them feel like they were really part of the experience. And does that sound familiar? Because Mashima does the exact same thing. Like the Commedia dell'arte, his series are first and foremost supposed to be good old character-driven fun. Sure, Fairy Tail and Eden Zero on the grander scheme are trying to tell a full and fleshed out story, but on a moment-to-moment basis, they're trying to make the audience laugh, feel welcomed, and maybe even to have them cry with the cast. And to reach that goal, Mashima's first step is to enable the audience to open up to any of his series simply by seeing who is on screen, something that he accomplishes with stock characters. Don't get me wrong, there is definitely an argument to be made about laziness in character design here, I get it, but let's be real, this is Hiro Mashima. This dude has made hundreds of really exciting and vibrant characters who come in all variety of color, shape, size, gender, ethnicity, culture, and theming. I mean, he's got quite literally everything from a sexy, sadistic nun to a giant mustachioed space god to a buff cat dude with a big-ass sword to an archer that wears a horse head mask. And yeah, I'm gonna get comments about Gildarts looking like Shanks or fucking Gajiel looking like Raditz. Yes, he also pulls inspiration and pays homage to other series through character design as well. But the same rule applies. Both Gildarts and Shanks are aloof but powerful father figures. By planting a character like that, someone who watches One Piece can hop over to Fairy Tail, see Gildarts, and have a base understanding of what's happening in the show. And secondly, the anime also kinda did Gildarts dirty by making him look way more like Shanks than the manga ever did, but inspiration and homage are a topic for another day, so we're just gonna stick to Mashima's own series going forward. The point is, this man has plenty of creativity when it comes to designing characters, but he makes the intentional decision to replicate those designs to make it easier for viewers to bridge the gap between different series. For example, let's say you watched Fairy Tail until it ended nearly a decade ago. Then, 5 years later, Eden Zero's first season drops, and you're a bit curious about it, but you don't really know anything about the series, so you're unsure if you want to watch it. But hey, you turn on an episode, and you see a familiar face as Happy pops onto the screen, and just for a moment, you get a sense of home. You've been here before, you're seeing a friend from the past. And then you keep going a few more episodes and you see Elsie Crimson, who looks identical to Erza Scarlet. I mean, they basically even have the same name. And you come to find out that the similarities don't end there. Erza was always a character who was stronger than the protagonist. She was a strict, badass knight who was also a tragic woman who lost an eye. She is star-crossed lovers with a man named Jellal who has blue hair and marks across his face. She's a character who strives to be the shining light in a world that she knows to be dark, depressing, and unfair. And the epitome of that is demonstrated by her inability to be with the one she loves through most of the series. And when you start learning more about Elsie, that's kind of her starting point too. Their plots have so many of the same threads woven between them, and it acts as connective tissue between the series for the audience to latch onto. This means you don't need to know Eden Zero to appreciate and understand any scene that Elsie is in. You immediately get the vibe of who she is, and you can build the world up from around her as you become immersed in the show. And that's an important note here as well. The similarities between these characters, who are essentially reimagining of people from Mashima's previous stories, are only meant to be foundational pillars. Knowing Erza does not take away from Elsie or her story at all. Elsie's character arc doesn't really repeat Erza's so much as it rhymes with it. Their narratives share the same themes and they meet at specific points, but they are unique and offer vastly different experiences and outcomes. Familiarity with Erza does not stop me from feeling the heartbreak of Elsie's story. All it does is open the door to connecting with this character even faster than I would have. And the same is true for Justice and Jellal, or Shiki and Natsu, or Rebecca and Lucy, or Happy and Happy, or any other similar design between Mashima's series. This repeated character design acts as a foundation to make this new world feel more familiar so that anyone can approach it and feel welcomed, just as Arlecchino's Mask did 400 years ago in those Italian theaters. It doesn't matter if you are a seasoned anime vet or a newcomer, if you are rich or poor, Eastern or Western, Mashima wants everyone to be able to enjoy his works as quickly as possible. They are series for the people that are meant to make you feel welcomed and wanted. So yes, reusing character designs can be lazy, it can be boring, and it can be done poorly. But when you really look at Mashima's stories, I cannot imagine why you might think that that is the case here. Because what I see when I look at Eden Zero and Fairy Tail reusing character design, I see something that is done for the audience in what I consider to be a truly beautiful and effective way.